So hi everyone, welcome to our first graduate studies information session. This event is a great opportunity for us to hear from grad students about their experiences applying to grad studies, just kind of getting their overall thoughts on it so far. My name's Gab, this is Kate. I'm the Vice President of Senior Affairs for the CSA, and Kate is the Vice President of University Affairs for Ranco, so she speaks French, I do not. We will start it with the panelists just introducing themselves. Then we'll ask them a few pre-prepared questions, and then we'll open up the floor to a Q&A. Feel free to ask questions like yourself during the Q&A. If you're not comfortable turning on your microphone or speaking, you can always send the questions to us and we will ask them on your behalf.
Donc, bonjour tout le monde. Mon nom est Kate, je suis la vice-présidente des affaires universitaires et c'est Gab, la vice-présidente des affaires seniors. Donc, bienvenue à notre premier événement des études supérieures. Donc, on va procéder, on va introduire tous les panélistes et après ça, on va vous donner le droit de poser des questions. Et si vous n'êtes pas à l'aise d'ouvrir votre micro, vous avez juste à nous écrire par le chat et on peut les poser pour vous. Donc, voilà.
Great. So we'll start with panelists introducing themselves. So if you just want to say your name, your program, why you decided to attend grad school at uOttawa, and just overall how you're liking grad schools, and if you do know what you want to do after grad school, maybe you can mention that as well. So we'll start with Geneviève, if you want.
Sure. My name is Geneviève. Most people call me Jen, but we'll just stick to Geneviève to avoid the confusion for tonight. I am first year master's student. I graduated in the spring, so I had a pandemic graduation, which was fun. Started my master's of arts and communication in September. I'm in the media stream, and I just found a research supervisor, so I'm going to be writing a thesis on representation of visible minorities in the media. What were the rest of the questions?
Just why you decided to go to grad school.
Oh.
What are your thoughts so far, I guess?
I kind of always wanted to go to grad school. I had applied to a few, but uOttawa got me with a scholarship. So if you have a really good GPA, you can have like your full tuition covered, which was really helpful for me in helping me make my decision. And I'm really enjoying it so far. It's a bit different than your undergrad, but you get used to it. For me personally, I find the workload isn't as heavy because I have less courses right now. Okay. So yeah, I'm taking 3 courses right now, and that's a full semester.
Oh, perfect. Okay, nice. All right. Jennifer, do you want to go next? You're on mute.
My name is Jennifer Dumoulay, and I am a 5th year PhD candidate in the Department of Communications. I see some familiar faces in this room, and that's because I am also a part-time professor in the Department of Communications, so I've had the pleasure of meeting many of you before. Before doing my PhD at the University of Ottawa, I did my bachelor's here, so my undergrad here in communications with a minor in business administration. Then I worked for a bit and went back and did my master's in communications, also at the department here at uOttawa. Then I worked a bit more and decided that working was not what I wanted to do. So I went back to school again and did a law degree at Queen's. When I finished that, I worked again and then decided that I still didn't want to do that. So I'm back for the 3rd time at uOttawa to do my PhD. How is grad school? Grad school is great. I'm looking forward to hopefully finishing this year, this academic year, because at the end of this year, I'll have done 4, 6, 9, 11 years of post-secondary. Is that right? 9, maybe 14. Maybe it's 14. Let me count and get back to you. But I've done quite a bit of post-secondary education, and I've been told now it's time to start working.
Right. Makes sense. Elliot.
Hey everyone, my name is Elliot. I also did my undergrad here at uOttawa. I did honors Bachelor of Arts in Communication with a minor in Business Management. And I graduated in December, so I had a bit of time off in between, 8 months or so, where I worked. And now I'm back here for my master's. I'm doing Master of Arts in Communication in the thesis option, looking to research the use of cell phones at concerts, the way people use cell phones at concerts. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. Grad school so far, yeah, I would agree that it's very different than undergrad. For me, it's also a lighter workload than before, kind of a different workload. You know, not so exam and test focused, more focused on like smaller projects and assignments throughout the semester. So I personally like that more. I really like how courses are structured so far, and just the fact that it's smaller class sizes, and you know, everyone kind of comes to class passionate about the topic and prepared to discuss whatever that week's material is. So it's a very different than just the kind of, you know, lecture at you style that you might get used to in undergrad. So I've enjoyed it a lot so far.
Right, nice. And I know Elliot and Genevieve, sorry, you guys just started, but do you guys have any idea of maybe what you want to do after, or kind of still up in the air?
Well, my research supervisor, I like just chose him. I chose Professor Boulou. I don't know if any of you have ever had him, but he's really good, really passionate, and he's kind of pushing me to do a PhD. So I'm considering it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't really my intention to be like a career academic or anything like that. I also chose to come back here because of the scholarship opportunity that was presented based on my GPA. So that's why I stuck around for master's and at uOttawa. But I'm hoping that, you know, immersing myself in the research process and what that looks like, I'm hoping I can apply some of those skills to the jobs I work in the public sector and the private sector in the future.
Right, okay. We only have the 3 panelists tonight, correct? Yes, okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure. All right. So the next question we will ask is, how was the application process for you? Did you have any difficulties, or do you have anything worth mentioning to senior students? I don't know if you wanted to translate it. I mean, I think we're mostly in French. Oh no, sorry. Like I said, we're working off of two computers right now. So it's one of them.
Donc, simplement pour résumer ce que Gab a dit, pourquoi vous avez choisi d'aller à l'école supérieure? Est-ce que vous aviez une raison qui vous a poussé à appliquer, ou par simple curiosité, ou comme vous voulez répondre?
And this is kind of an open to all panelists. We don't have to go one by one if you don't want to.
I can start. I kind of knew that I wasn't ready to be in the workforce full time at 21 years old. So that's kind of what drove me to do a master's. Because if you think about it, 21 is still really, really young to start your career and all that. So I wanted to do it to further study the topics that I was interested in. And also not necessarily to kill time, but I wasn't ready to go into work full time. So it's why not do your master's while you're waiting?
Okay.
Je peux répondre aussi, mais je peux le faire en français et en anglais si ça plaît tout le monde. Alors, j'ai fait des blagues que je n'aimais pas vraiment travailler, puis c'est vraiment un blague. Quand j'ai fait ma maîtrise, j'étais un employé au gouvernement fédéral à temps plein. Alors, j'ai fait ma maîtrise pendant que je travaillais à temps plein en même temps. Après que j'ai complété ma maîtrise, j'ai travaillé encore pendant quelques années, mais c'était vraiment juste parce que je ne savais pas qu'est-ce que je voulais faire après. And then, so what I was saying was I worked full time while I was doing my master's degree. So everybody's experience in grad school, their reasons for grad school are all very different, even if there are similarities. When I finished my undergrad, one of our professors who's still at the department was like, Jen, you've got to do a master's degree. And I was like, I would love to, but I'm broke. My OSAP is out. I'm like, I did not get a scholarship to go to grad school because my GPA was not what some of my co-panelists are. And so I went back. I was already kind of working, and I went back to my FSWEP job and got bridged in. And then about 8 months into my first government job, actually my second, because I'd switched already, I met somebody that was doing a master's degree. And I was like, oh, I should do that. Someone told me I should do that. And so I applied and happened to get in. And the same thing kind of happened after the master's. Is I was still working full time in the government. I was in the same job that I was in while I was doing my master's, and I just didn't feel like it was going anywhere. A lot of people my age in the government were kind of stagnant, and they'd been in the same position for 5 or 10 years. And I went, oh, I can't do that. Like, I don't like my job enough to stay here for that long. And so I looked at all my options, and I was like, I don't want to do a PhD, which is funny because, you know, that's where I am right now. I was like, I don't want to do an MBA because that's really expensive. I was like, I don't want to go to med school because I don't do science. And I was like, well, I guess law school is my only option. So I kind of like tossed all my eggs in the law school basket, ended up getting in, deferring because I was broke, working a bit longer, and then saving some money so that I could go to law school. And then when I was in law school, I was kind of working a little bit, what you're allowed to do there, teaching assistant positions, RA positions, not a lot because it's quite intensive in terms of the workload itself. And then I did the requirements afterwards. I did my probation period in the government as a lawyer, and was like, well, this kind of sucks. It's not what I wanted to do either. And then I was looking for advice, and I thought about this professor who was like, Jen, you got to go to grad school. And I was like, I'm going to look him up and see what he's doing, and make my email to him very personal and be like, I'm looking for advice, but I'm super interested in hearing about your research projects. And I was, but also I was looking for advice. So it was very self-serving. And then when I was on the website looking for his resume and his new research projects, I saw an ad for the PhD program. And I went, I think I can get into that. And so I applied and happened to get into the program. And the rest is kind of history. And I can come back to this a bit later. I'll stop talking so that Elliot can chime in. But I think that it's very, it might seem random and kind of haphazard. But in retrospect, 15 years later, it all makes perfect sense. So I'll stop there for now.
I can echo what Jen said to an extent. I also had a professor who I respected, who really was pushing me to keep going further in my education. And at the same time, I really liked working, and I discovered in undergrad that I kind of liked having a variety of things going on. My job in the government has been flexible, which is nice. So they've allowed me to kind of set my own hours and continue working part-time as I study. So having that variety of things going on is why I decided to stick at it and to go into master's, because yeah, I just like having, I don't know, one foot on both sides of the door, I guess. I like doing some work and sticking around in school too.
If I could just like add to that, I also work for the government, and like from what I've seen, and clearly from the experience of my co-panelists as well, government is very flexible in terms of if you want to do your master's and work part-time, they're very flexible at that. So don't let it stop you.
Yeah, like what it sounds like from what you guys are saying is that it's like it's a little bit easier to work and study at the same time while you're doing your master's, whereas undergrad it's a little bit more like you're taking 5 instead of 3 classes. So
I haven't had any exams yet. I haven't had any midterms, and all of my finals are take home. So it's a lot of presentations and assignments. So if you like, I'm someone who enjoys writing essays. Anyone who knows me knows that. So if you're like me, like that, it's enjoyable.
Right. Okay. Nice. So the next question is, I mean, I guess we've kind of already touched base on this, but what's your favorite part about being a grad student, and what do you find most challenging about it?
Donc, quelle est votre partie favorite d'être un étudiant en maîtrise, et c'est quoi les parties qui vous mettent plus au défi?
Ben, je peux parler de maîtrise, programme de droit et doctorat en même temps. Alors, je dirais que la chose que j'aime le plus, c'est vraiment qu'est-ce que tout le monde vient juste de parler de, c'est la flexibilité. Comme un étudiant au niveau supérieur, et je dirais dans des programmes de droit aussi, il y a plus de cours en droit qu'en maîtrise ou au doctorat. C'est vraiment comme un autre baccalauréat. Alors, tu as 4 ou 5 cours en automne, 4 ou 5 à l'hiver. Mais je dirais, pour la plupart, c'est vraiment à toi de décider qu'est-ce que tu fais et quand tu le fais. Alors, c'est vraiment la flexibilité et je dirais la comptabilité aussi. Alors, ça, c'est mes choses comme préférées, que je peux moi-même décider qu'est-ce que je fais, qu'est-ce que je fais pas. In terms of the challenges, I think it's also related. It's that idea of discipline and responsibility and accountability. Undergrad was a very long time ago. Unfortunately, I'm sad to admit. But I remember it being much more driven by the professors and the assignments and the deadlines that they set for you. And I found in grad school, and to a greater extent in law school, which is kind of half grad, half bachelor's degree, it's this weird intersection between the two. You're the one that's accountable for doing your work. And so learning how to manage that independently from someone kind of telling you what to do is probably the biggest challenge. And even now, again, 14 years, I talk with colleagues in the PhD program, and many of us have at least 7 to 9 years of post-secondary. That's kind of where we all have a tendency to sit. There's still a lot of like procrastination and stuff, but the difference, I think, at the grad level is a little bit more of ownership of that procrastination. Like, if I don't want to do something today, it's not because I don't have time to do it or I've got all these other assignments. It's because I've made a decision that I'm not going to do whatever it is that I need to do today. And so I think that's kind of like the challenge, is navigating that world.
Right.
Yeah, I have to say, like, I agree. I don't want to say it's more relaxed because, like Jen said, you're more in charge of your own schedule and your own deadlines and stuff like that. But the feeling that I have so far, and I'm only a couple months in, is that it's less of a workload in terms of studying and things like that. And even like I'm only doing a master's, so I'm not sure how it is at the PhD level, but like I have final take-home exams where it's like a 25-page paper on a topic that you're interested in. So it's not like anything is really imposed on you. It's that's what I like about it.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, I would agree. It's the flexibility, both in terms of how you want to use your time, which requires discipline, and also within the courses in terms of your deliverables. There's often a lot more flexibility on what you want to focus on and being able to pursue things that interest you. And yeah, that's what I'll say. And also within the classes, I think I kind of touched on this earlier, but the smaller class sizes and the fact that everyone who's there, you know, if you choose to pursue post-secondary past undergrad, you're making a pretty conscious decision. So everyone who's there is like, I don't want to say excited to learn, but excited to discuss and debate and talk about what we agree with and disagree with. And yeah, it's a lot more interactive than undergrad.
Definitely.
Okay.
Also, side note, if anyone wants to ask a question like in French, I'm like perfectly bilingual, so I feel comfortable answering in both. Moi, je parle anglais et français, donc si quelqu'un veut poser une question en français, je serai capable de répondre.
Great. Thanks, Jen. This is kind of like my own personal question, but I just thought I should add it now. A professor told me once that if you don't like writing, you shouldn't pursue like a grad study or like a grad degree. Would you say that like a graduate study is more written than like testing or kind of thing, or is it kind of the same, I guess?
So I think that there's a couple ways to answer that question and to think about that question. The first thing I would say is there's a lot of different programs at the graduate level. Ottawa U in particular has at the master's level, the thesis and research paper, which are more research and do require writing, but also the MCOM program. So the Master of Communication, like a certificate. No, it's not a certificate. It's a master's, but it's a course-based. That's the word I was looking for. So a course-based class would, have shorter assignments than writing, say, a thesis or a research paper as kind of your evaluation. So the assignments would still be longer than you've probably written in undergrad. But the way that I like to think about that is you've written, I'm assuming 10 to 15 page papers by the time you hit third or fourth year. A 25-page paper is less than half of that, like more. So if you can write 10 to 15 pages, you can write 20 to 25. It's 5 to 10 more pages of words. It's not that much. And the first time you get an assignment like that, it seems daunting, but the more you do it, the easier writing gets. So I would strongly encourage anyone who doesn't like writing to not be discouraged, explore other versions of a master's, like a certificate-based program rather than a research program. But the more you write, the easier it gets, is the other thing that I would say.
Okay, nice.
You're also,
Yeah, and even, oh, sorry, go ahead.
When you're doing a master's, you're doing it, you're taking classes and doing research on something that you're passionate about, something that interests you. So it becomes a lot easier to write when it's a topic that you love to write about, as opposed to something that was imposed on you by the professor that you don't really have an interest in.
Right, okay, makes sense.
Yeah, and I was going to say, even doing the thesis option, an option in communications is to do kind of a part multimedia aspect, like a video or something, and then, you know, a 50-page thesis instead of a 100-page thesis. So that's another option too, if you're someone who's more creative. So I would definitely say, don't let the writing aspect of it scare you away.
And I like what Elliot just said very much. It's something that wouldn't occur to me personally, which is interesting for a whole bunch of reasons. I don't feel like I have a lot of skills when it comes to making videos. But I think doing research, whether you're doing a thesis or a PhD dissertation later, part of that task involves advocating for yourself and defending or proving why the format that you've chosen is appropriate. So Elliot does research on cell phones and social media, and I'm paraphrasing that terribly. I realize this based on the conversations that we've had, but I think you could make an argument that you should be able to tweet your entire thesis. And you'd have to find a supervisor that was supportive of that. And there's a process that you would need to go to get that kind of thing approved. But I feel like in communications, there's space for these kinds of things. And if that's what you're thinking about, if you want to do your thesis in a comic book format, which has been done at other universities before, let a supervisor that you're thinking about working with know. Don't spring that on them later. That would be kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. So our final question of like our pre-prepared questions was just knowing what you know now, is there any advice that you would give to a future graduate student, or something that you wish someone would have told you like beforehand?
I would say, I'm not someone who connects with professors and like talks in class and stuff like that. So when it came to me asking recommendation letters, by the way, I know that you had asked a question about the admission process and we hadn't really gotten to it. So we can touch on that in a sec.
Later, but it's fine, yeah.
But I'm not someone who talks to professors, who doesn't raise my hand in class and stuff like that. So don't let that discourage you from asking for recommendation letters, because that was like the big daunting thing for me. I was like, I don't want to do my master's. I don't want to ask any profs for letters. I'm not like that. They're not going to know who I am. I never participated in their class. Even if I got good grades, I never participated.
Right.
And profs are like not surprisingly, but they're very encouraging and nice about it. And they're like, hey, like I had you 2 years ago, but you did really good in my class. And even though you didn't talk, like I'll be happy to write you a letter. So don't let that discourage you. Don't let it scare you away. Profs, especially in the Department of Communications, are super, super, super supportive.
Right. Just on the topic of recommendation letters, before Jen and Elliot respond, how many recommendation letters do you need? And is there can any prof write a recommendation letter, or does it have to be like a certain, like a full-time, or someone else? Just something to think about.
So I had applied to Ottawa U, Concordia, and Carleton. I know
We'll talk about that later, Genevieve.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can't.
And I think it was Concordia who required 3 letters. So I asked 3 different profs. And one of my profs had told me, you should ask your second year research methods prof to write you a letter if you did good in that class. Because I see Sophia's face, she doesn't look like she wants to do that. Because a master's is very research focused, especially if you're going into the research paper or thesis option.
Okay.
So if you can get a good recommendation letter from your research methods professor, then that can be helpful. So I think for Ottawa U, you need 2, but I had 3. And one of them was from my research methods prof, and then one from a 4th year class.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer, but Elliot, did you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think the application process and things I wish I'd known kind of go together. Kind of the same question for me. So I'd definitely say start early if you're interested in applying. The process itself is not too difficult. It's pretty well documented, but it is a lot of steps. So start early. And also scholarships. There's so much money on the table for people who are pursuing research. So either the thesis option or the research project option. And that is also a pretty lengthy process, but I mean, the money that's on the table can really pay for your tuition and then some. So it's a lot of effort, but it's very high reward. So I would definitely recommend doing that. In terms of what were we just talking about? The recommendation letters. Yeah, recommendation letters. I'd say go to profs who, if you did, connect with any professors, definitely go to them. And those people are also a good place to go to if you don't know, you're looking for a supervisor and you're not sure who to pick. That's how I ended up finding my supervisor. I talked to some professors who I respected in undergrad and told them what I was thinking about researching. And they gave me some great recommendations. So that's how I found my supervisor. So I'd recommend that as well.
Okay.
This conversation about recommendation letters is fascinating. And that's because everybody seems to kind of have a different perspective on it, which really isn't very helpful. So I apologize that I'm adding a third different perspective. What I would say is I've heard and seen mixed things. Having applied to law school and 2 grad school programs, I've personally used a combination of professional and academic references. I definitely think having at least one recommendation letter from a professor is required to get into a master's program. That's just kind of my impressions. A PhD program as well, I think you would need to have at least one recommendation letter from a professor that knows you well. In terms of picking between full-time and part-time, there's mixed opinions on what is better. As a part-time professor, I encourage my students to get letters from full-time profs, but I'm more than happy to write letters for students that I've taught before. I've written some in the past. I know I'll be writing more in the future. I know some of my students have had success. So that to me says that a letter from a part-time prof can carry quite a bit of weight, or as much weight as a full-time professor. The thing I think that matters with reference letters is you want someone, and this is again kind of contrary to what's already been said, someone who knows you. Even if it's just for one class. That was something that I struggled with in undergrad. I'd had so many classes. I switched from science to comms to a whole bunch of different things. And then it was sitting in a 4th year class and Professor Paré was like, okay, if you're thinking about grad school, your professors need to know who you are. And I had the exact same thought. I'm like, nobody knows who I am. I'm like, I work full time. I'm like, I come to class, I sleep through class, and then I go home. I'm like, how am I going to get a reference letter? So it's one of those things where the sooner you start thinking about it, the sooner you can build those relationships. And they don't have to be like super tight. You don't need to email your prof every week just so that they know who you are. But if you finish a class with someone and you like that class, I would say take another one with that person. You're going to enjoy the class more if you like the prof anyway. And then if you do decide to look for references, you have someone that's got like 2 classes with you, maybe 3, And they'll speak to that in their reference letters. Like, oh yes, I remember this person. And again, maybe I shouldn't say this as like multiple hats, but when I get requests for reference letters, like I go through course assignments that I've received from students, and I make sure to be able to speak to those specific assignments so that it's very personal. And the more exposure I've had to a student, the more precise I can be in their reference letter. So that's kind of my 2 cents on reference letters. Make sure that it's someone who knows you well. Don't pull some person off the street and have them write you one. That's probably not going to get you in. And then I wanted to answer the other question because I'm so excited about that. Things I wish I'd known. So I actually got a t-shirt that you guys will probably not be able to see because we're not in person. But I got it just for tonight. It's Elle Woods from Legally Blonde, and it's, you know, what, like it's hard. That's what I wish I'd known before applying for grad school. And the reason that I say that is grad school is a lot of work. Law school is a lot of work, but I hesitate to use the word hard. I think if you're interested in the topic that you're working on, if you're willing to put in the time, you're going to do well. And so that's what I wish I'd known before, because there's a lot of stigma around grad school and how difficult it is. And it's like, no, just do your stuff, just do your work, and you're going to be fine. Sorry, that was long.
I completely agree with that. Like Jen, I also switched from sciences to comms in undergrad, and being in a program that you don't like, that's what's hard. But if you like the topic, then it's just, yeah, you do your work, and it's not hard. It's a challenge. It's a healthy challenge, is what it is.
Right.
Something else that I wanted to touch on of some stuff that I wish I had known. So when I applied to my master's, I originally applied to the MCOM, the course-based one. And it wasn't until after I was accepted into that uOttawa sent me an email, and they're like, hey, your GPA is really good. You'll have a full scholarship and a guaranteed TA position if you switch to research paper or thesis. And I was like, well, like, hell yeah, I'm going to do that. Like, what's it? And even if you're like, I know a thesis can be really daunting, even to me, that like, I switched to the research paper option because I was like 50 pages, double space, that's manageable. I can do that. And then I was like, maybe I should do a thesis instead. So I'm switching again. But yeah, that's something that I wish I had known. If your GPA is 8.0 or higher, you have a guaranteed TA position and your whole tuition is covered if you do a research paper or a thesis, which were really like the driving force for me, that I was like, yeah, like why not?
And you have less classes. That was a huge factor for me when I chose which stream to do at uOttawa for my master's. With a thesis option, and again, it's been a while, so this might have changed. I only had to take 4 courses with a thesis. And that made it really manageable while I was working full time. So that's actually how I chose, is I was like, I like my job. I don't want to give it up. How can I make this happen? And I took a summer class before my program officially started. So I knocked 1 course off. Then I only had 2 in my fall semester, which was super manageable while working full time. One was evenings from like 7. No, I think I had 1 because I did a directed study. I did a research paper, a research project with a professor. So I only had 1 class. And then I had research to do on the side. So again, something you can do on your own at home. You don't have to worry about like leaving work to come into school. And then I had 1 class where I had to be on campus from 2:30 to 5:30 every week for a semester. And my supervisor at work was very understanding. I was really only missing an hour and a half. I skipped lunch and I worked an extra hour on like a Friday or something every week. And that's what allowed me to do it. So thesis is 4 courses. Research paper, I believe, is 6. And MCOM, I think, is 10.
Yeah, so I was originally in the MCOM, and I was like, oh, like 10 courses, 5, but I think they split it up differently in grad school so that you're doing 1 consecutive year, because I think you're doing courses in the summer, if I'm not mistaken. And then you do even less courses. You do 6 courses with the research paper and then 4 with the thesis. So it's really, really manageable. There was something else that I was going to add.
Sorry, I interrupted you, I think.
No, that's okay. Oh, yes. All the courses are in 3-hour blocks. I don't know if it's like this for you, Elliot, but I know for me, like when I was picking my courses, it's all 3-hour blocks. So either 8:30 to 11:30, 2:30 to 5:30 or 7 to 10.
Yeah, that's right. So it's just one meeting per week per class.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so it does make it a lot easier to build a schedule, especially if you don't have many classes.
So just to kind of confirm, so the MCOM it's like 10 classes, but you don't have, sorry, so I guess I probably should have said this first, but so the research paper and the thesis, you have classes plus like a big research paper or like report kind of thing. And then the MCOM is class-based, so you don't have like the big project or paper at the end.
Exactly.
That's correct. And the thesis or research paper is usually done over 2 to 2.5 years, whereas the MCOM, like Genevieve was saying, I think the intention is to have it done in one. Usually.
Okay.
One, maybe 1.5.
Yeah, like one like calendar year, not academic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Nice. So now we'll open up the floor to our Q&A period, if anybody has any questions. We didn't get any questions. Oh, never mind. We just did. So someone's asking, will uOttawa cover the whole tuition fee for international students if we have a high CGPA? I don't know if you guys would know that question or not.
That's a good question. Actually, I'll let someone else, if someone else has the answer. I don't have it, but I was going to suggest where they could go for information for it.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I know for domestic they do. I don't know for international, so you probably have a better answer than me.
The best person would be Paul Andre, who it may not be working right now. But there's another session coming up on November 18th. I'm going to plug this now, Gavin. Like,
I was going to plug
it. Were you? Okay. November 18th is more of a how to apply for grad school session. And tonight is more of like a what is it like to be a grad student. So I would suggest maybe saving that question for November 18th.
Yeah, but it's a great question though, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is, what academic year should we start our master's application process?
I started thinking about it in third year, and I applied first semester of fourth year. I applied, actually, that's not true. I applied right after Christmas. You can apply before Christmas, but I applied right after Christmas, and I had gotten my acceptance letter on winter reading week of fourth year.
Okay. Just out of my own curiosity, if I, after this Zoom call was like, oh, I want to apply to grad school, is that possible, or is it kind of like a little bit last minute now?
I
think it's possible. This is about when I did my application last year, which I highly don't recommend waiting that long as possible. But yeah, no, it's it's totally doable. I mean, I did it and I'm here, so.
Yeah. And I think the applications are due in May, I think, for the master's program. International students is a bit earlier. I believe it's January 15th-ish. The deadlines are all on the website. The biggest part of that is getting your references. You want to give them enough time to prepare your letters. Getting an email about a week before the deadline is due definitely decreases your chance of getting a reference letter. And I would say it decreases your chances of getting a good reference letter. So that would be, for me, that was always the most important piece, is once you figured out like where you want to apply, sending your professors an email saying, hi, I'm interested in going to grad school. These are the schools that I'm thinking about. Would you be willing to write me a reference letter? I'd be happy to provide you with all my information like later, because then you can work on your statement of interest. I see someone's asking about that. Work on your resume, like once you've sent out those preliminary emails.
So another question is either option better than the other? So BCom or master's with thesis or master's with just master's with research, like what's better?
What I was told from professors is that the MCOM, the course-based one, is better if you're planning on pursuing like a professional career in the government, for example, just because it gives you a little bit more professional experience. And I believe with the MCOM, you have a co-op option. And then for the research paper and thesis, for research paper, either way, like all three options are a master's. So there's not one that's better than the other in terms of helping you with job prospects, I don't think, but I don't know if maybe Jen could speak to that because she has a bit more experience than me with post-grad.
Thanks for saying that I'm old. So I think that there's kind of two parts to this. One is it's a very personal decision to make because of all the other factors that you need to consider. Again, thinking about my own experience, like the MCOM would not have been possible while maintaining full-time employment for me in the job that I was in when I applied for grad school. The way that I approached it was strategic from a what can I do while I'm working kind of thinking, but also what's going to leave the most doors open for me. By doing a thesis, it made it more likely that a PhD was possible. I haven't heard of anybody going from an MCOM or MCOM-like program to a PhD program because you don't have that body of research to rely on to say, I can invent a project, carry out the project, and summarize the findings of my project. That's what a research option gives you that an MCOM probably won't. I say probably, I can't guarantee it, but that's kind of my experience. When I was in the government and I've spent a lot of time there, I've had managers that have had PhDs. I've had managers that have had bachelor's degrees. I've had managers that have had law degrees. I think that that's also an important point that Genevieve was making, which is that a graduate degree is a graduate degree is a graduate degree. So getting one is going to give you advantages. And then there's other things to think about when you're picking which one to do.
And like I did, it's easy to transfer if you change your mind afterwards.
Right. That's a good point. Okay. The next question is about letter of intent. Is there anywhere that you can kind of look for an example? Like, how would you go about that, I guess?
That's a good question. So for anyone who might not know, a letter of intent is where you express your proposed research project when you're applying for a research-based program. So it's part of your application. I don't think it's required for the MCOM application. Oh, it is. Okay, perfect. There you go.
It's on the MCOM, it's more professional. So you're more citing your professional accomplishments, less what your research would be about.
So then it sounds like there's different directions to take it. Examples, so people don't really publish those.
I can send you mine if you'd like. I can share it with you by email.
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll type my email in the chat just so you have it.
And I think outreach like that is a good way to get examples. If you know people that are in grad school, it's a good place to go.
Yeah, I can share mine as well. There's something else I was going to say here. I think it might have been for another question, but I can share mine I can share my my letter of intent as well, if anyone would like.
Also on the, sorry, I just got a text from one of the participants. Yes, I'll share it with you too. So also, yes, on the uOttawa website, they actually have a step-by-step of what to include in your letter of intent, I'm pretty sure. So it'll say like start by stating your intent for which program you want to apply to. So specify if it's the MCOM, the MA research paper, or the MA thesis, to point out potential research supervisors. So go do your research on profs in the Department of Communication and say like, oh, well, I'm interested. So like for me, I knew the general direction of my research. I knew that I really wanted to study visible minorities and their representation in the media and how that affected their identity and things like that. So it's easier to decide which professors would be a good match. It depends because it lists all of their research interests on the uOttawa website. So if you search up, I believe if you put uOttawa MA Communications, it'll give you a step-by-step of all the information to include in your letter of intent, but it's like you can be free with it and decide to include additional information if you want. I believe it's 500 words max, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Sounds familiar, yeah.
Just like staying with the topic of letter of intent, someone asked, I'm not wearing my glasses. With the letter of intent, do you have to secure a supervisor before you submit the letter of intent? Sorry.
No, you don't have to secure a specific supervisor. Like we mentioned, you should mention some potential supervisors that might fit your topic and what you're interested in, but you definitely don't need to have that completely secured at the time of application.
They make you identify, or they ask you to identify 2 potential ones that are in line with this field of research, but you don't need to go in with a specific research question or like know what your methodology is going to be or know exactly who your supervisor is going to be. Like I didn't start actually meeting with supervisors until the 2nd or 3rd week of school. So like once you're in your master's, then you start like looking into it, but you don't have to know all of that before. You just have to have like a general idea of what you want to do.
My experience with that was a bit different, partially because I did my undergrad here. So the caveat is I changed supervisors is the caveat. But I think if you can indicate professors that you would be interested in working with, and if you've reached out to them beforehand, I think that strengthens your application. I think it also makes your time in grad school a bit easier. But again, there's mixed thoughts on that. Some people prefer to wait. Some professors say it's too early to pick a topic. Like there's a whole bunch of mixed views. I had secured a supervisor for my master's degree. I had emailed somebody that they're no longer here. They've transferred to a different university, and sent him like a letter saying this is what I'm interested in. This is what you're doing. We'd had a meeting, and you can still do virtual meetings with professors right now. So I would encourage you to do those, not with like 10, maybe with 2, to see if you'd actually like to work with somebody. And then when I got into the master's program, I was in a class in my first semester, my first actual semester, and I took a class with the prof that ended up supervising me. And there was just something we were working on in class. And I'm like, this is actually what I want to do. And so I switched my topic and I switched my supervisor, and that wasn't a problem. There's paperwork that needs to be filed when that happens. You should probably let the other person know that you no longer will be working with them, just as a courtesy. But professors don't take that kind of stuff personally. It becomes a personal relationship, but it's not personal in terms of like choosing to work with somebody over somebody else. It's about fit, topic, personality, and all those kinds of things.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, making sure that your personalities match up and that you can like work well with them is super important. Like, not to sound super millennial or Gen Z, but like it's important that you vibe with your with your supervisor, because if you don't, you're gonna have a hard time.
Makes sense. Someone asked, do you enjoy being a TA, and how many hours do you TA? I'm assuming a week.
I love it. I TA for CMN 1548, Intro to Organizational Comms in French with François Cossette. And it's online, so obviously it's a bit different. So like my role as a TA in Zoom University is monitoring the chat box. But I'm sure it would be different if it was in person. And I also write up some of the exam questions. I attend the 2 classes a week. On Tuesdays and Fridays, an hour and a half each. And then I write the questions before the exam. So it's not that much. I believe the contract is for 130 hours during the whole semester, which equals out to a max like 10 hours a week.
All right. Nice.
Yeah, that's the same number of hours for me. And I really enjoy it. I am TAing for CMN 1160, Intro to Media Studies with Pierre Bélanger. And that's a completely online class, as in it was online before the pandemic and virtual and all that. It's kind of self-serve Brightspace content. And then because of that, the TAs are kind of on call to be there to answer questions if people are struggling with the content or have any questions. And I also grade papers and exams, but interacting with students and answering questions is what I really enjoy about it. So yeah, it's a good experience, and it also looks good on your CV for the future. So
And I've TA'd for, before I started teaching part-time, I TA'd for Professor Mark Lowe's primarily at the PhD level. I had one semester where I was only doing 60-hour contracts with him because I was working outside of the department. And so I felt that 130 might have been too much. I found the workload varies depending on the course. Sometimes it's just holding office hours, reviewing multiple exams, reviewing short answer assignments. As a professor, I've had several TAs and they do a variety of different things, including now monitoring the chat box during online classes. It's another one of those relationships, though, that you can curate. I would encourage you, when you do secure a TA position, to reach out to your professor early, introduce yourself, and offer to meet with them. Even if before they do, they'll offer to meet with you anyway. But being a TA is an opportunity, or it can be. So I gave a guest lecture in one of Professor Lowe's class at the master's level. I usually offer my teaching assistants an opportunity to do a guest lecture also, which if they're thinking about going to PhD studies, it's really helpful for them to like experience teaching for the first time if they haven't had a chance to do that. Or even in the workforce, you do presentations in front of large groups. Well, try it here, get practice at it here. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities to kind of make a TA position whatever you want it to be, as long as the professor that you're working with is flexible.
Okay. And then I think one final question, I think Jennifer, you might know the answer to this one. They found a lot of different dates for applications online and like when they're due. Do you have any advice of like where to look or where we might find that information?
Yes, I'm looking for that now. I think we actually have it in some of our email correspondence when we were looking at this, at organizing these. International students, I'm fairly confident, is January 15th or 18th-ish. It's mid-January, and I'm pretty confident again that domestic students is May. The websites seem to kind of redirect, which I've noticed while I'm looking for the deadlines. But if I can dig them up during our call or during our meeting this evening, I'll post them in the chat. And who was it that asked that question? If you wanted to email the CGSA account, I'll put that in the box. We can coordinate that offline also.
I see just another missed message. I just don't want it to get lost. Emily asked if any of us took a gap year between undergrad and postgrad. I didn't, but I don't know if either of you can speak to that.
I'm happy to. So I did. So I took a gap year in between all of my degrees, and I would say a gap year from academics. So I finished my undergrad in April, which is when like the academic year ends, and I was working right away. And then I started my master's the following September officially, but really it was like July for a summer class. So I worked a full year before starting any graduate courses. And then when I finished the master's, I took about a year, almost 2 years off. No, I think about a year and a half off from the master's to law school. And then from law school to the PhD, I took a full year off as well while I was articling. So those are gap years of a sort, I guess. I didn't travel the world and go backpacking and hosteling, which is, you know, what I should have done in retrospect. But I felt like for me, a gap year was really important. Financially, I didn't have the ability to start grad school right away. And I have found, again, for me, the break has been very helpful. It's allowed me to come back to school refreshed. And it's allowed me to come back to school desperately wanting to be in school, because I haven't enjoyed the jobs that I've had while I've been working full time. So because I appreciate it more than I personally would have if I'd gone through it without the gap year, I find I'm more likely to work harder and do better in school when I'm there.
Yeah, I took 8 months off in between because I finished in December and then the master's started in September. And I really enjoyed those 8 months, being able to a mix of work and just, you know, being able to refresh. I'd taken some pretty intense past couple of semesters before graduating. So yeah, especially if you've got a work opportunity in your field, that's a great time to do that. and maybe that work can even be flexible and you continue doing that when you go into master's. So yeah, I don't think there's definitely nothing wrong with taking a gap year.
Okay. We have one other question. Sorry, it says, does anyone have an idea of how uOttawa considers additional schooling in the form of postgraduate certificates in the application process? I would prefer to use a prof from that, but my school seems to require undergrad.
If you have to do 2 reference letters, my thoughts are to do one from both. Get at least 1 reference letter from an undergrad professor. And then if you have a professor or instructor or whatever word it is they use in the other field, a second reference letter from that person I think would be fine. But I think a letter from a full, like a professor at a university would weigh quite heavily, and that would be a good way to go.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, well, I think that's the end of our first session. So I want to thank our panelists for joining us tonight and sharing your experience of grad school. I'm sure many students have benefited from your insight and your experiences. And then, like Jennifer said before, just a reminder that we will be having our next session on November 18th at 7 p.m. And this session will focus more on the application process. So it'll highlight dates and deadlines, requirements for application, that kind of stuff. We'll also have a representative from admissions at the Faculty of Arts who will be attending the event. So the information will be legit and they will know what they're talking about. Other than that, yeah, just keep an eye out for that event. I think we have mentioned it a bit in our promo and emails, but we'll send you more information as it comes. And yeah.
Donc, merci à nos panélistes et c'était vraiment intéressant de vous écouter et j'espère que tous ceux qui étaient là ont aimé cette séance. Juste un petit rappel, la prochaine séance aurait lieu le 18 novembre à 19h. Cette session-ci, elle se concentrera sur le processus de candidature, donc tout ce que vous devez savoir pour faire votre application à l'Université d'Ottawa. Aussi, il va y avoir un représentant des admissions à la Faculté des Arts, donc quelqu'un qui est vraiment informé, qui peut répondre à toutes vos questions, qu'on n'a pas nécessairement toutes les réponses. Donc voilà, bonne semaine de lecture tout le monde.
Yeah, happy reading week, guys.
I'd also like to take a second to thank Gab for organizing this. It's a really important session to have, and I wish that there had been something like this when I was in undergrad. So this is a really great initiative, and the series is fantastic.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Also, feel free, if you have any questions, you can add me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram, shoot me a DM. I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, if anybody has any additional questions and you don't know how to reach out to any of our panelists, you can always contact the CSA and they will either direct you guys directly to them or they can direct them to me and I will reach out. So yeah. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great night.